I don't feel right if I don't move first thing in the morning.
Okay.
It's very strange. And I mean, I like to, there's this sense about being out there before everyone else is awake that I really love. And it just kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day for me.
This is episode number 53 with Amelia Boone. Welcome to Pursuing Health. I'm Julie Fouché, medical student and former CrossFit Games athlete. Here, I bring to you information and inspiration from experts and everyday individuals for how to use lifestyle to maximize health. Thank you so much for joining me. Now let's get started with this week's episode. Welcome back to Pursuing Health. My guest in this episode is Amelia Boone, who is a full-time corporate attorney and somehow also manages to be one of the world's most decorated obstacle racers. Since the sport's inception 5 years ago, she's amassed more than 30 victories and 50 podiums, including 3 World's Toughest Mudder titles and a Spartan Race World Championship. I've admired Amelia's drive and success in balancing her athletic and legal careers, and I've looked to her as an inspiration for my own journey competing in the CrossFit Games while in medical school. I was so glad to finally have the opportunity to sit down with her and get to know her a little bit near her home in the San Francisco Bay Area. We definitely had a lot to talk about. We discuss everything from her upbringing to how she got into obstacle course racing, how she's used CrossFit to train for races, and how she's grown through a major injury that kept her from racing last year. Before we get started, I have a few quick reminders for you. First of all, thank you to all of you who checked out my subscription program with Pure Pharma that I launched in the last episode. Now you can learn a little bit more about the program at my website, www.juliefouché.com/Pure Pharma. With this month's subscription, I'm talking about my personal approach and the process I use for goal setting. I'd also like to ask that if you're enjoying the podcast, please head over to iTunes to subscribe and consider giving it a rating. I'm always looking for inspiring stories to share, so if you or someone you know has used lifestyle to overcome a serious health challenge, please send your story to me at info@juliefouché.com, and I'll select some to share here on future episodes. To check out my online training programs through Beyond the Whiteboard, visit www.beyondthewhiteboard.com/Julie Fouché. Finally, please remember that although I'm very close to graduation from medical school, this podcast is meant to share the experiences of individuals and does not provide medical advice. So with that, let's get started here with episode number 53 of Pursuing Health, featuring Amelia Boone. Awesome. Well, welcome to Pursuing Health. I'm really excited to be here with Amelia Boone. Really excited to finally meet you in person. I'm a huge fan, and I have so many questions for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I'm equally excited to be here. So cool we could actually finally meet, connect in person.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we start with the beginning? Mm-hmm. I know you weren't a runner early on. So what were you like as a kid? What kind of things were you into?
Yeah. I was a kid that was kind of a jack of all trades type of athlete. Okay. I was pretty good at everything I picked up, but I was never the all-star and, the super best person. So I played a lot of different sports, but it was all team sports. And it was all soccer, softball. Softball was actually my primary sport, which people find funny because they don't see me as a softball player, but I pitched for a really long time.
Oh, that's cool.
So that was...
I have no throwing abilities whatsoever, so I'm very envious of that.
It's actually, it's funny. It's one of those things where I'm like, oh, I know I can do that. I love going out and playing rec softball still if I can get the chance. But yeah, so I was active and I always kind of a kid in sports, but I never really thought about playing beyond or, playing into college or anything like that. So it was more of just kind of the fun for me.
A fun thing. When did you actually start running, or did you ever run for fun when you were younger?
Yeah, I think when I was young, when I was playing sports, we would run as a team, or conditioning during the summer and whatnot. And so just growing up in Oregon and being outside, we did a lot of hiking as a family. And so I would go out and run, but I never really understood anything about it. I didn't know what a tempo run was. Even once the watches came out and all the technology, like I didn't ever time pace or anything like that. So it was just it was to just move my body. And during law school, I think it was to really just to get out there and have like a stress release for a little bit, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So at what point did you then start doing some races?
Yeah, I actually wasn't until I graduated law school and I went to work at a law firm in Chicago and had a coworker come up to me and say, have you seen this thing called a Tough Mudder? And I was like, no, I haven't. And he pulls it up online and we look at it and he's like, I want to get a group of us to do it. And so that was in the winter of 2010 and that we signed up for one that summer. And so I spent 6 months trying to train and figure out how I could build upper body strength to be able to do monkey bars and things like that. And I actually ran a half marathon in preparation for that. And that was the longest I had ever run. And then that was actually to this day, the only road race that I've ever run.
Interesting.
And so I started the obstacle racing and just fell in love and decided to go that direction.
That's amazing. So you actually did at that point train for it. When you first saw what it was, what were your thoughts? Did you think like, oh, this is totally me? Or was it just, oh, I'll try this one race and then see what happens?
It was definitely the latter. I didn't think that, I thought it would be fun and it would be an experience, but I didn't actually think it was something that I would want to really continue doing because I was actually really bad at first. It's funny. You don't realize when you're, you know, late 20s or something, you're a grown adult, how hard simple things like controlling your own body weight can be. So you grow up doing monkey bars on the playground and you think no big deal, or you grow up climbing a rope. And then you get up there and I remember, and I fell off right away. And it was just this feeling like, really? Really? Like, I feel like I'm in like an okay shape, but I can't even hang from a bar.
Wow.
And so to me, it was kind of this wake up call that there was this new challenge and it was something, and I didn't want to, you know, I'm a perfectionist like a lot of people, and I wanted to be good at something. So it became my mission.
So it was more the challenge that drew you in.
Yeah.
Okay. And what did you think after your first race?
I adored it, like absolutely adored it. I thought it was so cool for me because I always kind of poo-pooed running races, road races, because I always thought, why would I pay money to go run a certain distance? And it seems boring. But with obstacle races, it was running and then broken up by a little task and then running again. And it was up and down mountains and ski slopes. And it was just interesting. It was beautiful and beautiful terrain. And so everything about it just kind of drew me in.
Interesting. And for people listening that maybe haven't done any of these races, can you just explain what they are and like once you get to a competitive level like you're at, what the landscape looks like in terms of races and what are the big ones that you train for? Yeah.
So basically obstacle racing is this term that when I started, nobody ever actually, we didn't know what to call it.
It's still so new. It's crazy how quickly it's grown. It's funny to, when I was looking at it, it's very similar to CrossFit over the last 5-10 years, how quickly these things have grown.
Exactly. And I think I think it was a few years after CrossFit started gaining in popularity. And so we've kind of tracked the rise of the two. And actually a lot of people including myself, use CrossFit to train for obstacle racing because most people don't have a big obstacle course in their backyard. So you kind of mimic some of the movements. But so Spartan race and Tough Mudder are really the two big races, and they are race series, and basically the lengths range from everything from a 3-mile sprint to the longest one, which is World's Toughest Mudder, which is a 24-hour race where you run as many laps as you can in 24 hours. And you know, a lot of them are on mountains, so you're going up and down trails and different terrain, and so they're a big series every year, and it's now become a very competitive circuit, and people have quit jobs to do this full time, and people are, it's very much tracked the rise of CrossFit, not to the same extent. There's not as much opportunity, I think, to be a full-time professional athlete in it yet, but it's definitely, it's getting there. It's crazy.
That's really crazy. And so you start training, you love the challenge. How did you start then training for these races, or how did your daily kind of exercise regimen start to change as you had this as your focus?
Yeah, so I made a goal after the first race that I needed to be able to do a single pull-up because it was really sad to me and I couldn't do it. Yeah. And I had spent 6-7 months trying to do a pull-up. And for some reason, just it couldn't click. So I actually finally bit the bullet. I had resisted it for a long time because, I thought it was I wasn't quite sure what to think of it. It was kind of expensive, but I actually joined CrossFit Gym. And then I started doing pull-ups. I started getting into CrossFit, and within weeks I was able to do pull-ups.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it was just like things started to click.
What do you think it was? Do you think it was just the environment or practicing them more often, or what? Yeah,
I think it was the environment. I think it was also learning the training, doing the negatives or things like that. Things that when I was just trying to do a pull-up, I was using like a weight assist machine, and I didn't really know. I didn't really have a plan or things like that. But actually learning from the people around me who had been there and been a beginner, and then how they went to do that and how they were able to do that. And so for me, that was huge in building the upper body strength to be able to do things like get over walls and a lot of the obstacles. You got to climb a rope in a obstacle course, and so things that you do in the CrossFit gym. So you carry heavy sandbags up and down a mountain, and yeah.
Wow. So at that point, you're doing CrossFit a couple days a week. You're running in there too, or what is your kind of weekly training look like at that point?
Yeah, at that point I was living in Chicago, which isn't the greatest city for running unless you have 18 miles of the lakefront path, which is beautiful, but it's flat as a pancake. And
winter is probably pretty tough.
Exactly.
Probably blow right away.
Oh yeah. I've had some really nasty runs in the middle of the winter. But so I actually did a lot not as much running, but a lot of time on the big step mill at the gyms to build the endurance and build the leg strength for the mountains. And I would try and find hills in Chicago to run because those were important, but I ended up running parking structures.
Okay.
And there were a few overpasses were the biggest hills that I had. So, but yeah, it was kind of a mix of CrossFit and then some running and a lot of the climbing on step mills, walking on an incline, things like that.
Wow. Just work with what you have, I guess.
Exactly. You kind of make do. When I moved out to the Bay Area, I was like, the hills, trails.
This is amazing.
This is so great.
It's like a whole new world.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're known for waking up really early to start doing your training. I think I've heard you say like 4 a.m. is your usual wake up time. Have you always woken up early, even before all of this, or is that just what you have to do to get your training in?
A bit of both. I've always been a morning person, and I was actually one of those kids growing up that I think my parents wanted to murder me because I didn't take naps and I wanted to go to bed really early and I wanted to wake up really early. So it's been kind of just how I function, and I don't feel right if I don't move first thing in the morning. Okay. That's very strange. And I mean, I like to, there's this sense about being out there before everyone else is awake that I really love. And it just kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day for me. And so I realized when I started working as an attorney is that it's the one time where I know I won't really be bothered. Right. That no one's going to be asking for a contract at 5:00 in the morning. So hopefully, but if you leave your training until the end of the day, then it's really easy just to stick around the office and to get distracted by other things, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Absolutely. Well, that's very impressive to me. I wouldn't say I'm a morning. I like to be up early, but I've never really liked training in the morning. I feel like I need time to wake up. And then once I have to be somewhere early enough that like 6 a.m. would be like my earliest training time. Yeah. And up before that, I can't really fathom moving around.
Well, it's interesting. I can get up and run really early in the morning. If I'm going to lift, that's harder. Different. And I actually think there's a lot of, I remember, trying to do heavy back squats at 5 a.m. I mean, like, this is not working. It's just like not working right now. We'll save this for the evening. So
yeah. Oh, that's cool. And you mentioned you're an attorney. That's one of the also really cool things I think about you, and that is so fascinating to me as I'm still in school, but how you balance the two and how
you probably could have, I mean, you're at the point where you have all these opportunities. You probably could say, oh, maybe I'll just work part-time, or maybe I'll take a break, but that's not what you're all about. And you are still putting your career as an attorney really high up. Can you just talk a little bit about that and that decision process?
Yeah, I think, I mean, when I first started this, it was just a hobby. It was just, and then things came along, sponsorships came along, and I started winning races, and it was really cool. And I love that. But for me, what I've always said is that racing has been my stress release. It's been my outlet. And the moment you turn that into, that's the thing that's going to pay rent, that's going to put food on your table, I think it changes the character of what you do. And then I also just I love being an attorney. I love the mental exercise of it. And there's something to me about the challenge of juggling it all, you know, and I'm sure you can probably relate to that too, because it's not a perfect fit, because I'm sure that there are times where you have to put training aside and focus on school, and then vice versa. And so to me, it's this continual challenge to see what I can do with it.
No, it's so true. That juggle is so interesting. But for me, it's interesting watching you, because during my first year of med school, was really the only year that I truly did both full time. And it was probably one of the hardest years of my life. And at one point I did have to make that, I remember talking to my mom and saying, you don't have to do this. You could quit right now, or you could drop out of medical school. We're still going to love you. It's going to be fine. But then for me at that point, it became about the challenge and trying to show people that it was possible. And then it became more fun again, I think. But after that, I really did a lot of juggling back and forth. Like, this one is more important this year. This is more important the next year. Because in that year, it really was only about training or school, and there was nothing else in my life. And at times I just felt like I was going to go crazy. Like, I just needed to chill out and go out with my friends or something.
Exactly.
So how do you balance that? Do you have time to just like do nothing, or to do something besides those two things?
It's interesting. I tell people, you make sacrifices, as I'm sure you know, when you try and juggle those things, and you almost like two full-time careers. But I think I've done a pretty good job of maintaining some balance. I just came from a wedding this weekend. I still can get out and do social things. I think it also helps that a lot of my friends have become, or a lot of my racing buddies have become friends. Yeah. And so your social outlets are almost being at races on the weekends and building time around that. And they're your training partners early in the morning. There's, some runners up here in Marin that I'll come up and run with on the weekends. And so it's not always a perfect fit.
Right.
And I'm not going out and partying until 2 a.m., but I was never that person anyway. So
I'm not missing much now.
I'm not like, oh, shucks.
Right. No, that's so true. I think I've noticed the same thing. As my best friends now are people I've met from the gym, and even just being able to spend time with them is so fun. So it's a very good point. How did it change? I mean, you said having your full-time job still helps you keep racing more fun and less pressure, but I have to imagine there was still an increase in the pressure as you started to have success in the sport.
I think that's actually been one of the hardest things for me, because you try to not put pressure on yourself, but everyone always says, like, it's hard. The cliche thing is hard to get to the top. It's even harder to stay there. And so once I had won, I had won World's Toughest Mudder, I had won the Spartan Race World Championship, and then all of a sudden you have that target on your back.
Right.
And you feel that. And even if you tell yourself you're not, you're like, it's okay. Like,
just going to have fun out there.
But everyone's gunning for you, and you kind of feel these expectations. And I'll be completely honest, it in a lot of ways, it took the fun away from a lot of the sport in some aspects. So it was kind of trying to maintain that and to hold on to that. And I actually, I reached a point about a year and a half ago where I was like do I really enjoy this? You know, like, is the pressure getting to me? And it was actually injury and being forced to take a step back where you all of a sudden, where I was able to reframe my relationship with it as well, and have a bunch of gratitude really for just being able to be out there. And I'm sure you can relate to with the injury stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I want to talk more about that because I think that's so powerful. And you see it all the time where it's injury or it's setback that really helps people gain perspective or really understand why they're doing it or what they love about their sport. Can you just talk, well, first tell us a little bit about the injury and what you've been going through the last, I don't know, almost a year, almost a year
God,
now.
man. Yeah. So I was riding high at the end of last year, and then started to get more into ultra racing. So just started long trail races. Right. So I was training I'd qualified for Western States, which is a huge deal. Of 100 milers in ultra running. And I was training for that. Yeah. And got a little bit overzealous. I mean, if I can look back now and think of all the mistakes that I made along the way and thought I was doing things fine and blah, 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 but ended up with a stress fracture in my femur, which is a really hard bone to break.
It's a big bone.
It's a big bone. People are like, couldn't you just get a normal one like in your foot? And it actually ended up being a very big fracture. Okay. So it took a very long time to heal. So I was on crutches for about 3.5 months. And if you've ever been on crutches for that amount of time, the compensatory issues that you get from crutches are awful. And so that knocked me out of Western States. It took me out of the entire obstacle racing season. And in September, I finally, got off crutches, got the all clear, got really gung ho and wanted so badly to come back for the end of the championship season, and ended up with a second stress fracture in my sacrum, and which then knocked me out for another 3 months. Okay. So I have been coming back from that and knock on wood, going well this time, but it's one of those things where you just, in stress related injuries, you feel like it's all your fault, and that sense of guilt that I've been dealing with this past year, and trying to learn from those mistakes and the training mistakes going forward, has been, it's been awful, but it's been probably the best experience for me, because I feel like it will make me a stronger athlete in the end. And I hate saying that now, because when this happened, everyone told me, they go, you're going to come back stronger. And I just wanted to smack everyone. Right. So yeah, but I'm finally to that point where I see that now and realizing that, I'm 33, which I don't feel like is old, but I don't recover like a 20-year-old anymore. So
definitely. You had some I was reading your blog, and so you had some really amazing quotes on there. I wanted to read one. Okay, this one where you were talking about just a kind of the mental toughness and how much, actually that is one question, is how much of what you do you think is the mental toughness versus the physical? Because those races are, I feel, from my standpoint, having never done one, it looks like it's mostly mental.
Yeah, I think the longer the race gets, the more mental it is, for sure. In a race like World's Toughest Mudder, which is 24 hours, I always say the first 12 hours is physical, the second 12 hours is purely mental. Yeah. It's just gutting through it. So I think that it's definitely, the longer it gets, here's a huge mental aspect of just getting through it. And unfortunately that sometimes means ignoring pain signals. Right. But, hey, we all do that.
Right. Maybe just to a bigger degree. But at one point you said, I mistakenly started to believe that I could make my body do anything as long as the mind was willing. And at that point you were just talking about maybe pushing yourself too hard, like you just mentioned, kind of pushing yourself through pain or not listening to what your body was trying to tell you. And then the other one that I really loved was, so this is after your injury and you're talking about the process that you've gone through the last few months. You said, when I can't use my legs to do the talking, I have to use my voice. When I can't run from my demons, I have to confront them head on. And when I can't list podiums and accolades to prove my self-worth, I have to accept and realize that I'm worthy of love regardless of my race results. And more importantly, worthy of loving and being kind and patient with myself. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Like, can you just reflect on that a little bit, or talk about what you've learned from this experience, from this injury experience?
Yeah, I mean, so many things, but I think really it's easy to be on top. I mean, it's hard because you have that pressure, but
it's fun when you're winning everything.
It's fun, and life is easy, and you don't have to question things, and you don't really have to sit there and dig down deep, but and everyone's paying attention to you, and you get love and things showered on you, and people want you here and there, and so. And as soon as that's taken away, and so you start to actually measure your self-worth sometime based on podiums, based on victories. And when you don't have that, I think it really forces me to dig deep into, okay, if I take this all away tomorrow, if I walk away from the sport, am I still going to feel like an okay person? Or have I had so much of my identity wrapped up in this that I'm no longer going to be able to function? I no longer know how to find value in myself. And so I think for me, this entire process this past year, I was at every single race still on the sidelines, cheering people on. And I finally started to be able to see the sport through a different perspective from people who not necessarily were winning the races, but they were out there struggling through people. I went out there with a group of, some combat veterans, people that had lost amputees, lost limbs, and it takes them 8 or 9 hours to finish a course, but it's a different type of victory.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's been...
And you did that on your crutches, correct?
Yeah.
Which is amazing. I'm sure anyone listening who's been on crutches for any period of time can just appreciate that and be in awe of that. Yeah,
it was up and down a mountain. It probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, but let's be honest, as I've proven time and time again, not exactly the smartest person, but it was really meaningful, and it was by far the best thing that I've done, and so lucky to share that. And so it's really, this entire year has given me perspective, and then it's also forced me to kind of dig down deep and really get in touch with the body and things like that, and to learn to respect it and love it. And I think that so many of us now have gotten into this more is better and beast mode is better, and every workout has to be an epic workout. Because you see people post pictures of their ripped and bloody hands or things like that.
So intense.
Nobody's taking pictures of their epic rest days. Right. So I think that learning process has been really important for me.
Okay. Looking forward, how is your training changing, or how do you think it will be different?
Yeah, I definitely will be taking more. I will actually be incorporating way more rest than I have before. I think we went through whenever a female has a stress fracture, and I'm sure this in medical profession, is that the internet doctors come out and try and tell you everything that you have done wrong, and how are your calcium levels, how are your vitamin D, have you checked X, Y, and Z? They're asking you about your period, and you're like, who are you, random person on the internet? But you start to feel like, oh, what's wrong with me, and what have I done wrong? And it's this stigma, and it's awful. And so I think I've been, trying to cope with that and realize that I'm not a bad person, even though we make mistakes, and we get overzealous sometimes.
Yeah, it's so funny on the same thing, and not to that degree, but with my Achilles, it's the same thing. You think people are analyzing, my workout results on Beyond the Whiteboard. Like, you didn't do enough box jumps this year. Or you did too many box jumps, or this or that.
I actually remember that with your Achilles. And I remember with the CrossFit Games and seeing people talk about that. I'm like, really?
Which, I know. And it's so funny because I talked to Kelly Starrett afterwards, and I had seen him maybe a year before. He was doing a seminar at our gym, and he specifically looked at my foot, and he was like, that's a problem. Because he saw I had a little, it was it's called a Hagelin's deformity. And I knew, because my plantar's like fascia had been bothering me. My Achilles would bother me from time to time, and I would do things that would kind of keep it at bay. I really wouldn't do a lot of box jumps. I would mostly be doing step downs unless it was a competition, or I'd do a few just to try to keep up my ability. But like, I knew it was kind of inevitable. And like, yes, there's things that I probably could have done to make it better, but I was in a competition mode and I was going for it, and that's what we do.
Yeah. And you start to be able to justify or think things through, like, for instance, with the femur, like, I have a fully torn labrum in that hip. So I've always dealt with weird psoas issues. So I was just like, it's just my psoas acting up. And finally you're like, oh no, it's not my psoas, it's my bone. Or then, afterwards, when I came off of crutches and then the left side started feeling weird, and like my left piriformis, and everyone just kept telling me like, oh, it's just your body evening it out, getting used to being bipedal again. And so it's so easy as an athlete to kind of justify and to rationalize these little aches and pains.
Right.
And then, so for me now, I realize like, I can't, like, if there's a niggle, you shut it down. Like,
not
you
worth
shut
it.
it down and you take it slow and steady, because it's not worth, the experience again. So
that's good. So a much more listening to your body approach, more rest. What do you like to do for rest days?
Nothing. Is that
actually real rest? It's amazing.
Actually real rest. Because here's the other thing, is that everyone, and I did this too.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, well, it's not, I don't function well with rest days. I like to have some active recovery.
Right.
And then, an hour swim later, they're like,
oh, it's a great rest day.
Yeah. So I think what's funny is that, and this is what I've learned, people always say, well, I feel awful coming off of rest days. Yes, you should. The next day back, you're like going to be sluggish and things like that. That's why I work with a running coach, and he's great, is that we have rest day, and the next day is always a very easy run to kind of ease back into it. So I actually do firmly believe in the laying on the couch, being comatose, foam rolling, maybe, that kind of stuff, mobility stuff, but that kind of rest day, I think it's necessary. There are great active recovery days too, but I think that people tend to blur the two.
Right.
So,
or it's that, especially in CrossFit, you just go into the gym like, oh, I'm just going to row a little bit or stretch. Next thing you know, you're in the middle of Fran or doing something.
doing some crazy hero wad. You're like, oh, sure, you need a partner. Yeah, I'll jump in. No big deal.
We are definitely addicted to exercising. On that note, kind of talking about the rise of CrossFit and of obstacle course racing. I know in CrossFit, a lot of times people, or in the media, people are always like, CrossFit's so dangerous, whatever. Do you hear that much with obstacle course racing? Or is there a similar kind of, it's obviously very intense. You're jumping over fire, you're in electricity. There's a lot of potential for danger.
Right.
But do you hear that a lot? Or is it just, that's kind of what getting yourself into it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because I think with CrossFit, I feel like there are people it's dangerous because you're moving heavy loads quickly, and there's a lot of potential for, overuse injuries, things like that. With obstacle course racing, there is potential for traumatic injuries for sure. I've banged up my ankle, I've fallen down things, people roll things in the course, jumping down off a wall. But surprisingly, it's not, the injury rate in it is pretty low in an actual course. And I don't know if it's just because adrenaline, you have so much adrenaline that you actually are just, everything is firing. And so it's actually pretty safe. But what we don't know, and it's probably true with CrossFit too, is that it hasn't been around long enough for us to know the long-term effects on the body.
Right.
And the fact that we tend to over race, when you can race every single weekend, you can race a Spartan race every single weekend if you want to. And you may feel okay physically a few days later, but the accumulation and just the different twisting the turn, people don't realize too, you get cut up, super cut up, barbed wire scars. My knees were constantly bleeding. And even that creates a lot of inflammation in the body that, is your body trying to heal itself. So a part of me, when I look back at this past year where everything my body just seemed to fall apart, I wonder if it's these past 5 years of just hitting it really hard and never really taking an off season. So Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and your body finally just being like, I need a rest.
Enough.
Give me a year.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit earlier about what it has been like for you to watch this season and being on the sidelines. And something else I think you had written about on your blog was just being able to really genuinely be cheering for the other people out there and be like trying to help them do their best, and how rewarding that was for you, because it's so true. I think when we're competing, the focus has to be on you. Like, it's almost like you have to be a little bit selfish because you want to make sure you're doing your best out there and you're putting your most into your training. And it's hard to be worrying about what other people are doing. And that can be really rewarding. And I think it reminded me of kind of my first injury experience was actually when I was in high school, and I broke my foot in the middle of gymnastics season. And I knew that I ended up not being able to compete that season, and it was devastating because of course, you know, gymnastics was my life, and that was just terrible. But as soon as, I think I remember talking to one of my teachers about it, and they said, you know, you have a choice. You can either be upset about it and, you know, be sad, feel sad for yourself, or you can make the best of the situation. And so I spent the rest of the season really trying to be the best teammate I could be and cheer people on. And I think that is what set me up to be able to handle other setbacks so well later in life. And like when my Achilles happened, to be able to really quickly kind of put things into perspective, even though I was obviously devastated again. But it's so, and once the Achilles injury had happened, I felt like I could really genuinely be cheering for all the other girls out there. And it was so rewarding. And you think about it and you're like, why can't I normally do this?
Because they're not my competitors right now. No, but I think it's definitely true. It's given me that kind of that perspective and stepping back and being able to connect with people and to really just feel grateful to be in the environment. And I think that's something that sometimes we take for granted when you're singularly focused on that next race.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. You talked about your training going forward. Where are you at in the recovery process? Are you back to running? Are you looking ahead at races at all, or are you just kind of taking it day by day? I know you probably don't like this question.
No, it's hard because it's the recovery, and I'm sure that you know, it's a 2-step forward, 1 step back type of dance. And I think it's a side note, it's interesting. I think more people have now reached out to me about recovery and rehab and injury, and it's such a common experience with people. Yes. And like everyone, we all go through it. And so it's something that kind of binds us all together and gives us that perspective. But yeah, so I was on a return to running program and doing really well. I actually was attacked by dogs a few weeks ago when I was running.
Oh my goodness.
And I knocked over and hit a knee on concrete. So I've had to take a step back while my knee heals a little bit.
Okay.
But I should be good to go, so it just, what's scary is that like I was doing great, and then all of a sudden you get knocked off of something, and it's like not your own fault. And now I'm like, wait. If you knew dogs, what I just been through this past year, do not do this to me. But yeah, so no, we're on track, and hoping. So really, I think it's going to kind of depend how it unfolds, but probably starting back up in racing in April or May, so spring. But I don't know. It's one of those things that feels so rusty. It's scary.
But I think it's so scary, but the process of coming back, I think, is so rewarding, and seeing how far you come. And I mean, from being on crutches for that long, probably losing all of your muscle in your leg.
Yeah.
It's so dramatic to be able to come back from that, I think. And it's scary. Like, I know when I took a year off, I was terrified. I was like, all the girls are going to be so far ahead of me. How am I ever going to make this up? And I wasn't injured, but it was just a little step back in training. But coming back, you surprise yourself. And it's almost kind of more fun, I think, because you see the improvements constantly. It's, once you're kind of in your peak training shape, it's harder to see those. So
yeah, that's true. And I mean, at this point with, lost all muscle mass, and with a lot of things, I couldn't even do upper body with it. And so it was just like, all right, I'm just going to start over, blank slate, and go back to all of this, and have that fun in that rebuilding process and try and see those little victories. So.
Absolutely. So who is on your team now? You have a coach or people helping you with your rehab?
Yeah. So I have a lot of doctors. No, they're great. Yeah, I do. I work with a running coach. He's based out of here, out of the Bay Area, David Roach. Just because from the running aspect of it, I realize I need somebody not so much to make sure that I'm running enough, but to make sure that I'm not running too much.
Right.
Just because I would go out there for miles every day and just be in nature and have fun, and it would be too much. So work with a coach there, and then I have, various soft tissue people that kind of help keep me together and running, and they're fantastic. So, but yeah, that's pretty much the extent of it.
Okay. And then you've been working on these imbalances from being on the crutches and things. Are you doing a lot of physical therapy or corrective exercises?
I feel like I could have enough physical therapy exercises that I could do them for 24 hours a day, all day long. People always ask me, they say, what have you been doing with all your free time since you haven't been able to train? And I go, physical therapy exercises take longer than training.
Yeah.
So, so been in a lot of physical therapy. I work with a great, sports kind of chiropractor down out of the South Bay, Dr. Brink, and he's been helping me with a lot of the imbalances. And we've been doing actually a lot of animal type of movements. So a lot of crawling, a lot of that type of flow patterns to get the body moving all together. Because, your body gets in these patterns and it's not so much, I can sit there and do clamshells and glute med exercises all day long and I have buns of steel. But when it comes to actually firing in the correct pattern, that there's still that disconnect that you have to reestablish. Totally. Yeah.
And how do you do anything during the day if you're at a desk all day or you're working? Do you do anything to make sure your body is moving or you're not, reinforcing bad habits? Because I know for me, sitting on my laptop all day has caused me a lot of problems.
Yeah. So it's actually, if you could see my office, it's hilarious. It's like a torture tool device because I have a rumble roller sitting there. I've got different RX pads. I've got all my mobility tools there. And I do have a sit stand desk. And that's nice. that's been really nice. Obviously, with a broken femur, I couldn't really utilize that. But, so that's, I try and keep moving. I get up and I drink so much water that I have to pee every 30 minutes anyway. So I make sure that I get up and move and things like that. So definitely, but yeah, the sitting is awful.
Yeah.
It's so awful. So sometimes I feel like I was on a 6-hour flight last night and I was just like in more pain this morning if I had run 100 miles.
No, for me, I've been traveling the last week and my hips have been so tight. Yeah. I can just, I can tell it's crazy, but you don't realize when you're at home, you get up at least and move around a little bit in between. So it's not so bad. And you didn't have a coach the first several years that you were running, correct?
No.
At what point did you say, okay, maybe I need to have a coach?
I think, it was definitely when I qualified for Western States and I realized, okay, I'm going to run 100 miles and I've never run 100 miles before and I need to kind of figure this out.
Okay.
And because I had always just made up my training on the fly and which probably wasn't, and I would go into the gym with CrossFit and I would do what was programmed that day and just do everything the group way. And I don't know, maybe me doing things on the fly worked out just fine. But
I mean, you did have a lot of success doing that. So
exactly.
It's kind of amazing. I mean, do most people have coaches in the obstacle race world or no?
Yeah, there are more and more. There are people that are offering coaching. I mean, when I started, there wasn't. But now there's like obstacle specific coaches. A lot of the top obstacle racing athletes actually offer their own programs, but so they are coaches themselves. And, I've had people ask me and I'm like, I would have no idea. You don't want to be coached by me. Because I'm like, I have barely time to be a functional human being and keep my houseplants alive, which I don't have any because they're all dead. So don't have time to be a coach, but
you have a few other things that you're doing. Oh, that's really funny. Yeah. But interesting and really cool to see how it's evolved in the same, sort of the same thing, how CrossFit has evolved over the years with coaching and programming, and it's fun to watch. So I have been saying for years now that I need to do a Spartan race, but I really need to do one now.
Well, okay, so I remember you crushed the military,
the Pendleton course. Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of running in between it, but I feel like we would all be, I feel like you would give us all a run for, maybe I don't want you to run.
No. It's so funny because in CrossFit, I was more known as a longer distance athlete, but growing up, I never was. I was a sprinter in high school. Yeah. I did gymnastics. I was always better at the powerful, short tumbling things. Yeah. And I don't know where that came out of. Like even for that Pendleton run, it ended up being about a 2-hour event. Yeah. And the most I had run, I think that year, I had maybe run one 10K at the most. Okay. Like I would run no more than 3 miles. Yeah. But we were training all day. So we did a lot of long stuff and a lot of like sled pulling or like just walking with the sled. And that's all I was thinking about when I was, marching up those hills was just one foot in front of the other. So somehow it all works out, but I don't know where that came in. I have not done that much running since, but I think it would be really fun because it would give me something to train for, and just to say I did it would be a good experience.
It's cool, and it's I think you'd find there's actually been a lot of CrossFit athletes that have come out to do. I remember I ran one in Omaha with Kyle Kasperbauer a few years ago. He went out and ran a Spartan race there, and Tommy Hackenbrook, I think, he ran some of the first ones in Vermont. Oh, wow. Up in like the big beast courses in Vermont. Wow. So, yeah.
Yeah, that would be cool. I know there was one in Ohio last year, but it was the timing was just not good with my school schedule. So maybe this spring I have tons of time before I graduate. So maybe this is my time to try it.
Totally. Would love to have you.
That'd be awesome. Well, I want to finish with 3 questions that I ask everyone.
Cool.
So the first one is 3 things you do on a regular basis that have the biggest positive impact on your health.
So this is interesting because this is probably something that I wouldn't, that has changed in this past year. Yeah. So now I meditate on a daily basis.
Okay. And do you have a certain technique that you use or an app?
I'm really bad at it. I'm really bad at meditating, but I just feel like if I force myself to do it enough, then I'll do it. I use the Calm app. Okay. And that helps me a lot. I know a lot of people use Headspace too, but I chose a Pony and I stuck with it. Yeah. They're both great. The greatest impact on my health, this is kind of funny, but I call my parents every week at the same time. And I think that really keeps me grounded for sure. And then really it's more rest. Yeah. It's more rest. And I never thought I could be one of those people that, I still hate rest days, but when you're injured and you're forced to take for a long period of time and you realize you come out and you're still alive and still kicking and you realize, oh, okay, like there's nothing wrong with rest. Yeah. It's good for you. So
that is so interesting. I wonder what you would have said a year and a half ago.
I know. I would have been like long runs and, heavy weights and
perspective. Well, I'm sure it'll keep changing every year as it does for everyone. And that's so funny. I'm sure my parents will listen to this and say, why don't you call us every week? I try to, but it doesn't always happen. That's a good idea to have a specific time so that you make sure. Normally it's when I'm driving somewhere and they're like out to dinner and I'm like, okay, I'll talk to you later.
I was just bored in the car.
Yeah. That's a really good one. What about one thing that you think would have a big impact, but you haven't found a way to fit it in or make it a part of your regular routine?
I need to sleep more. I know that.
What time do you go to bed if you're waking up at 4?
I am in bed, by probably 9 or so, 9:30. Okay. But it's not always, I struggle with sleep quality sometimes too, and like staying asleep. So, it's something that I feel like if I prioritize more, but at the same time, I like I get 6-7 hours. So, but that, and actually I really need to, and at this point, with injury and everything, I've shied away from heavier lifting. It's just, I've gotten away in this past year before that from heavy basic movements, heavier squats, heavier deadlifts. And I actually feel like avoiding those has been somewhat detrimental in my total strength. And so trying to get over my fear of getting back to that.
Well, it has to be really scary with a broken femur,
right?
To be thinking about squatting or deadlifting heavy.
So,
okay. And what does a healthy life look like to you?
I think a healthy life is being able to be content regardless of if one piece is taken away. And so I think that that's what I've really learned this year, is that a healthy life is that balance and perspective of knowing that if one aspect is taken away from you, if one part of your personality, if one part of your life, you can still be fulfilled in other ways. And that's been the biggest thing for me to try and find this year, is that it's not necessarily filling a hole that, the racing that it was taken away from me. It's being complete without that. And I think that's really important for anyone. It doesn't have to be taking away racing. It can be, taking away relationships, taking away a job, and still finding peace there.
Right. So like really knowing who you are without any of the other stuff, and like being really happy with that.
And just being able to adapt and to roll with the punches like that, because I think it's definitely needed.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm so glad we finally had the opportunity, and I'm going to be cheering really hard for you this year and rooting for you with your recovery. And maybe I'll see you at a Spartan race sometime.
We'll get you out there. Tell me when and where, and I'll come to that one.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. I loved hearing about how Amelia has grown and gained perspective through her injury experience last year. I know my own experiences of injury have taught me some important lessons as well. Let us know how an injury or setback in your own life has helped to teach you an important lesson in the comments under this post at juliefouché.com. To make sure you never miss an episode and to receive exclusive content from me, head to my website, juliefouché.com, where you can subscribe to my email list. Also, don't forget to share your stories. If you or someone you know has used lifestyle to overcome a serious health challenge, please email me at info@juliefouché.com. I'll choose some of these inspiring stories to share here on the podcast in future episodes. If you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe and consider giving the podcast a 5-star rating on iTunes. Also, don't forget you can train with me by visiting beyondthewhiteboard.com/juliefouché. I always love hearing your feedback, so please leave comments under this post on my website, juliefouché.com, and share your thoughts on social media with the hashtag JFHealth. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time on Pursuing Health.